Nothing says Merry Christmas quite like the cold, hard weight of a manila envelope dropped onto your lap while Jingle Bell Rock plays softly in the background. I looked down at the papers, then up at Brad. He was adjusting his cufflinks, standing in front of the 12-foot Douglas fir we had spent 3 hours decorating just last weekend. The lights from the tree reflected in his eyes, but there was no warmth there, just a flat, bored indifference. "I filed yesterday," he said, checking his Rolex like he was waiting for an Uber, not ending a 5-year marriage. "I didn't want to ruin the holiday season by dragging it out. Consider this my gift of freedom, Maya." The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. Almost. It was 7 a.m. on Christmas morning. The cinnamon rolls I'd put in the oven were starting to smell sweet, filling the kitchen with a scent that usually meant comfort. Now it just made me nauseous. "You're divorcing me," I stated, my voice surprisingly steady. "On Christmas."
It's strategic, really.
Brad shrugged, grabbing his cashmere coat from the sofa. "Tax purposes. Start the new year clean. Plus, I've booked a suite at the Four Seasons for the week so you can have the house to process." He walked over, leaned down, and kissed me on the forehead. It was dry, impersonal, like a mafia don kissing a traitor before the hit. "Don't make a scene, Maya. You get the house, you get the car, you'll be fine. You're good at surviving, right?" And then he walked out. I heard the heavy oak front door click shut, followed by the roar of his Porsche Macan peeling out of the icy driveway. I sat there for exactly 4 minutes. I watched the snow falling outside the bay window, heavy flakes burying the pristine lawn of our suburban Connecticut estate. He thought I was just sitting there crying. He thought I was broken. That was Brad's fatal flaw. He always assumed that because I was quiet, I was weak. He thought that because he had plucked me out of a cramped apartment in Queens and dropped me into this sprawling mansion, I should just be grateful for the scraps he tossed me. He was playing checkers. I was about to start playing chess. I stood up and walked to the window. The taillights of his car disappeared around the bend. He wasn't going to the Four Seasons. You don't file for divorce on Christmas morning just for tax purposes. You do it because you're clearing the decks for something else. Or someone else. And you definitely don't leave your wife alone in the house where you keep all your secrets, unless you are arrogant enough to believe she's too stupid to look for them. I turned back to the living room. The divorce papers were still on my lap. I tossed them onto the coffee table. I didn't care about the legal jargon. I cared about the timeline. "Okay, Brad," I whispered to the empty room. "Let's see what you're really up to." I went straight to his home office. It was his sanctuary, dark mahogany wood, leather chairs, the smell of expensive cigars and old money. He always kept it locked, but I knew where he hid the spare key. Inside the hollow base of the tacky bowling trophy he won in 2019. He thought it was clever. I thought it was cliché. I unlocked the door and slipped inside. The room was freezing. He liked it that way. I sat at his massive desk. I didn't need to hack his computer. Brad was lazy with passwords. He used variations of his own name and birth year. Narcissists always do. But today, the computer was gone. The desk was clean. No laptop, no notepads, nothing. Smart. He had sanitized the scene before dropping the bomb. But he forgot one thing. The trash. Brad was meticulous about his image, but he was messy with his garbage. He assumed the cleaning lady, Rosa, had emptied the bin yesterday before the holiday, but I had told Rosa to go home early to be with her grandkids. The bin under his desk was still half full. I pulled it out and dumped the contents onto the Persian rug. Receipts. Starbucks cups. A crumpled wrapper from a protein bar. And then something interesting. A shredded piece of paper. Not cross-shredded, just torn in half and crumpled like he had done it in a rage. I smoothed it out. It was a parking receipt. Valet parking at Le Bernard Inn in the city. Dated December 23rd, 8 p.m., 2 days ago. He told me he was at a late-night board meeting in Jersey City. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture. Lie number 1. I dug deeper. At the bottom of the pile was a small velvet jewelry pouch. Black. No branding. I opened it. Empty. But there was a faint indentation in the velvet lining. A ring? No. Earrings. Heavy ones. I sniffed the pouch. It smelled like perfume. Santal 33. I don't wear Santal 33. My heart started to hammer against my ribs, a cold, hard rhythm. This wasn't just a divorce. This was a replacement. He had bought jewelry for someone else, 2 days before Christmas, while I was home wrapping his gifts. I stood up and paced the room. I needed more. A parking receipt and a smelly pouch wouldn't hold up in court, and they certainly wouldn't destroy him. I needed the money trail. Brad was a VP at a hedge fund. He moved money like other people moved furniture. If he was leaving, he was likely hiding assets. I walked over to the bookshelf. It was filled with boring finance biographies and untouched classics. But on the top shelf, tucked between The Art of War and Steve Jobs, was a thick gray binder. It looked out of place. It wasn't dusty like the others. I dragged a chair over and climbed up to grab it. It was heavy. I opened it. House deeds. But not for this house. These were deeds for properties I had never heard of. A condo in Miami, a cabin in Aspen, and a penthouse in Singapore. I flipped through the pages, my hands trembling. The dates on the deeds went back 3 years. 3 years? We had been married for 5. He had been buying secret properties for more than half our marriage. I looked closer at the Singapore deed. It wasn't in his name. It was in the name of an LLC called Orion Holdings. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed my laptop. I searched Orion Holdings. It was registered in Delaware, a classic move to hide ownership. But the contact email listed on the registration filing, it wasn't Brad's. It was sarah.niller.com. The name hit me like a physical slap. Sarah Miller, his efficient executive assistant, the one who always sent me Christmas cards, the one who organized our anniversary dinner last year, the one with the doe eyes who always told me how lucky I was to have a man like Brad. They probably heard my voice before, so let's get you millions of views. He would realize. It's fun to reach weight. It was the humiliation. They had been building a life together right under my nose, using our money while I was playing the dutiful suburban wife. I washed my face with cold water. I looked at myself in the mirror. My mascara was running, my eyes were red, but the shock was fading. In its place, a cold, sharp anger was settling in. Okay, Sarah, I said to my reflection, you want him? You can have him. But you're not getting the money. I needed help. I couldn't do this alone. Brad had lawyers who cost more per hour than my dad made in a year. I needed someone who operated in the gray areas. Someone who hated guys like Brad as much as I did. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in 4 years. Marcus was my ex-boyfriend from college, a brilliant coder who had turned into a security consultant, which was a polite way of saying he was a white hat hacker who sometimes wore a gray hat. We hadn't ended on great terms, mostly because I left him for Brad. The irony wasn't lost on me. I hit dial. It rang once, twice. Maya? His voice was groggy. It's Christmas morning. Unless someone is dead or you're dying, hang up. Brad served me with divorce papers an hour ago, I said, cutting straight to the chase. Silence on the other end. Then the sound of shifting sheets. I'm listening. He's hiding assets. Real estate. Offshore accounts, probably. He's been doing it for years. I found deeds under an LLC linked to his assistant. Classic, Marcus muttered. Let me guess. He left you the house and the car and told you to be a good girl? Word for word. And what you remembers in this classroom? And you want to burn him to the ground? I want everything, Marcus. I want to leave him with nothing but his arrogance and his leased Porsche. I'm in, Marcus said, his voice sharpening. But if we do this, we do it fast. If he filed yesterday, his lawyers are already moving to freeze joint accounts. You need to get physical evidence before he realizes you're not just crying in your pillow. Does he have a safe? Yes, I said, looking back toward the office, but I don't have the combination. He changed it last month.
Digital or dial?
Digital, one of those heavy biometric ones. Okay, don't touch it yet. I'm coming over. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't let anyone in, and Maya. Yeah? Check the garage. If he left in a hurry, he might have left something in the other car. I hung up. The other car. Brad's weekend Toyota vintage 1967 Mustang that he rarely drove in the winter. It was parked under a tarp in the heated section of the garage. I ran out to the garage. The air was frigid, smelling of gasoline and cold concrete. I pulled the tarp off the Mustang. It gleamed under the fluorescent lights. I opened the passenger door and started searching. Glove box, empty. Center console, sunglasses, and gum. I felt under the seats. My fingers brushed against something hard and plastic taped to the bottom of the passenger seat. My heart skipped a beat. I peeled the tape back and pulled it out. It was a burner phone. A cheap, prepaid flip phone. I flipped it open. The battery was low, but it turned on. There was only one number saved in the contacts. No name, just a number. I went to the messages. There was one unread text, received 10 minutes ago. Did you do it? Is she gone? I'm waiting at the airport. Flight leaves in an hour. Don't be late. I stared at the screen. They weren't going to the Four Seasons. They were fleeing. Maybe leaving the country. If he got on that plane, he could disappear with the money before I could even file a motion. I had less than an hour. The sound of a car engine crunching on snow made me freeze. I looked out the garage window. A black SUV with tinted windows was pulling into the driveway. It wasn't Marcus. Marcus drove a beat-up Jeep. This was a Lincoln Navigator. Corporate black. Two men in suits stepped out. They didn't look like holiday visitors. They looked like cleaners. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Brad, sending some associates to pick up a few files from the office I forgot. Let them in. Don't be difficult. He knew. Somehow he knew I was snooping. Or maybe he just didn't trust me. I looked at the burner phone in my hand, then at the heavy oak door leading back into the house. I had the evidence that could destroy him, but now I was trapped in the house with it, and his goons were walking up the driveway. I locked the garage door leading to the house and sprinted back inside. I had to hide the phone, I had to hide the binder, and I had to do it before they broke the door down. The doorbell echoed through the silent house like a death knell. Mrs. Sterling, a deep voice boomed from the front porch. We know you're in there. Open up. I clutched the burner phone to my chest. This wasn't just a divorce anymore. This was a war. And the first battle was just about to begin in my living room. I looked around frantically. The living room was open concept, nowhere to hide a thick gray binder. The knocking at the door turned into pounding. Mrs. Sterling, we have a key. We're coming in. A key. Of course, Brad gave them a key. I ran to the kitchen. My eyes landed on the tall stainless steel trash can, the one I had just emptied on the rug in the office. It was the only place that looked dirty. Men like Brad and the men he hired didn't deal with trash. They dealt with clean lines and sterile offices. I shoved the gray binder into the bottom of the can. I grabbed a handful of wet coffee grounds from the espresso machine and smeared them over the plastic cover. Then, I threw the empty Starbucks cups and protein bar wrappers back on top of it to cover it completely. The burner phone went into the waistband of my leggings, hidden under my oversized sweater. Just as the front door lock clicked and the handle turned, I sat on the kitchen floor, pulled my knees to my chest, and buried my face in my hands. The door swung open. Cold air rushed in, followed by the heavy tread of boots on hardwood. Mrs. Sterling? I looked up, making sure my eyes were wide and filled with tears. He left me, I sobbed, my voice trembling. He just left. The two men stopped. One was tall and bald, the other had a scar running through his eyebrow. They looked uncomfortable. They were expecting a fight, maybe a screaming match. They weren't expecting a weeping housewife sitting on the kitchen floor on Christmas morning. Ma'am, we're just here for the files, the bald one said, his voice softening slightly. Mr. Sterling needs the Project Alpha folder from his office. He said he forgot it. Project Alpha was code, I knew it. Brad didn't have a Project Alpha. Take whatever you want, I wailed, gesturing vaguely towards the office. Just leave me alone! Take it all! The scar-faced man nodded to the bald one, and they moved past me toward the office. I stayed frozen on the floor, listening. I heard them rummaging. I heard the drawers sliding open. It's a mess in here, the bald one called out. Looks like she went through the trash. My heart stopped. Leave it, Scarface replied. The boss said the files were on the desk. They're not here. Check the safe.
It's locked.
Forget it. He said if they aren't on the desk, just grab the laptop backup drive and let's go. were on a schedule. They were in a rush. That was my advantage. They didn't have time to do a forensic search. They just needed to sanitize the obvious spots. They walked back out a minute later, holding a portable hard drive I knew contained nothing but Brad's old family photos and music library. I kept my head down, sobbing quietly. "Sorry about this, ma'am," the bald one muttered as they passed me. "Merry Christmas." The irony was sickening. The door clicked shut. I listened for the car engine. As soon as the navigator pulled away, I stopped crying instantly. I wiped my face with my sleeve and stood up. "Merry Christmas to you too, boys," I whispered. I retrieved the binder from the trash, wiping off the coffee grounds. I had the deeds, I had the phone. And now, thanks to Marcus, I was about to have a team. 3 minutes later, a beat-up Jeep Wrangler skidded into my driveway, nearly taking out the mailbox. Marcus jumped out before the engine even died. He was wearing a hoodie and pajama pants, clutching a laptop bag. He burst through the front door. "I saw the suits leaving. Did they hurt you?" "No," I said, locking the door behind him. "They came for files. They left with a decoy." Marcus looked at me, then at the binder in my hand. A slow grin spread across his face. "God, I missed you." "Focus, Marcus, we're on a clock." I slammed the binder onto the kitchen island and pulled the burner phone from my waistband. This phone received a text. "Brad is meeting someone at the airport. Flight leaves in..."
Look at the time on the microwave.
45 minutes. Marcus grabbed the flip phone. He didn't just look at the screen. He pulled a cable from his bag and plugged the phone into his laptop. His fingers flew across the keyboard. "Okay, dumb phone, let's see who you've been talking to," he muttered. "No GPS on this model, but I can triangulate the cell towers from the last received message." "Okay, pinged off the tower near JFK International. Terminal 4. Terminal 4 is international," I said. "Where is he going?" Checking flight manifest for the smooth, engaging voice. Checking flight manifest for the smooth, engaging voice. Of course not. He's using an alias, or a private jet. Private jet, Marcus confirmed. Tail number N782B, registered to Orion Holdings. The same LLC as the deeds. The same? I nodded. Flight plan filed for Georgetown, Grand Cayman. Departure time 9:00 a.m. I looked at the clock. It was 8:15 a.m. JFK was 40 minutes away in light traffic. In a snowstorm, it was impossible. "We're not going to make it," I said, feeling the defeat wash over me. "He's going to get on that plane, land in the Caymans, and move the money before U.S. jurisdiction can touch him." "We can't stop the plane physically," Marcus said, his eyes glued to the screen. "But maybe we can ground it legally."
How? I haven't even filed a motion yet.
"The courts are closed for Christmas." Well, Marcus looked up at me. "Remember that time in college when I hacked the dean's email to reschedule finals?" "Marcus, this is the FAA, not a community college." "No," he shook his head. "I'm not hacking the FAA. That's a federal prison sentence. I'm talking about the passenger." He turned the laptop screen toward me. He had pulled up the passenger manifest for the private charter. 2 names. Bradley J. Sterling, Sarah J. Miller. "Sarah," I spat the name out. "Samamstet the sound that you care." "Sarah," I spat the name out. "Wait," Marcus pointed at the screen. "Look at the luggage log. They checked in 4 large crates, marked as personal effects, weight 200 lbs each. So, she probably packed her whole wardrobe." "Maya," Marcus looked at me seriously. "You don't check 800 pounds of personal effects on a rush flight to the Caymans unless you're moving something hard. Gold? Cash? Art?" "Cash," I realized. Brad doesn't trust banks. He always said if the system crashes, cash is king. He emptied the safe deposit boxes. "If he's carrying more than $10,000 in undeclared cash out of the country, it's a federal crime." I finished his sentence. "Homeland Security." "Exactly. But we can't just call the tip line and hope they answer on Christmas. We need to trigger an automatic flag." "How?" "Smooth, engaging voice for book narration, television, and social media. You've probably heard my voice before, so let's get you millions of views." "You want to frame him?" "I want to highlight him," Marcus corrected. "If I add a few suspicious search history tags to his IP address associated with that phone right now, the algorithms will light up like a Christmas tree." It was dangerous. It was gray hat hacking. If we got caught, Marcus would go to jail. Do it, I said. Marcus started typing furiously. Extracting packets, routing through a proxy. Okay, Brad is now excessively interested in fertilizer bomb schematics and non-extradition countries, according to the airport Wi-Fi.
Will it work?
We'll know in 10 minutes. But Maya, even if they stop him, they'll only hold him for a few hours if they don't find anything. We need to get there. We need to be standing there when they open those crates. We can't drive fast enough, I said, looking out at the blizzard.
We don't need to drive, Marcus smirked. You forget who my cousin is?
Vinny, the one who flies the traffic chopper for News 12. Looking at his. Grab my coat, Simon. Call him. Tell him there's a breaking story at JFK. Vinny was waiting at the local airfield, but the rotors of the News 12 chopper weren't spinning. They were tied down. The wind was whipping snow horizontally across the tarmac. Visibility was near zero, and the cold bit through my coat like needles. You guys are out of your minds, Vinny shouted over the wind as we piled out of the Jeep. He was a short, stocky guy with a cigar chewed down to the nub in the corner of his mouth. I'm grounded, FAA advisory. No visual flight rules. It's a soup sandwich up there. Vinny, I need 20 minutes, Marcus yelled back, grabbing Vinny's shoulder. Just to JFK. You fly this bird through hurricanes.
Hurricanes don't ice up my rotors, Marcus. I can't do it.
I stepped forward. I didn't have time for negotiation. I didn't have time for fear. I pulled the burner phone out of my pocket, the one that connected Brad to everything. Vinny, I said, my voice cutting through the wind, the man who is trying to steal my life is on a plane right now. If he takes off, I lose everything, my home, my future, everything. I don't have cash to pay you. But Marcus tells me you've been trying to get a permanent spot on the investigative team for 3 years. Vinny looked at me, narrowing his eyes. Yeah? So I held up the phone. This isn't just a divorce. This is international money laundering involving a major hedge fund. You get us to JFK, you don't just get a passenger fare. You get the exclusive rights to film the arrest. You get the story of the year. Then he looked at the phone, then at the gray sky, then back at me. He spat the cigar onto the snow. Get in. If we die, I'm haunting both of you. The flight was a nightmare. The chopper shook violently, dropping suddenly in air pockets that made my stomach lurch into my throat. The city below was a blur of gray and white. I gripped the safety handle so hard my knuckles turned white. Marcus was looking at his laptop, but his face was pale green. The status. I yelled over the headset. The flag triggered. Marcus's voice crackled in my ear. TSA pulled them out of the priority line. They're searching the luggage. But Brad is yelling. He's flashing his platinum global status. He's calling his lawyers. We have maybe 15 minutes before they let him go. Can you stall them more? I'm trying to jam the signal so his lawyer can't call the supervisor, but the airport security is strong. I can't hold it forever. Vinny banked the chopper hard to the left. JFK in sight. I can't land at the main terminal. Security will shoot us down. I have to put down at the general aviation pad. It's half a mile from the private jet center. We'll run, I said. The landing was rough. We bounced once, twice, before settling on the icy tarmac. Before the rotors even stopped, I unbuckled and jumped out. The wind at the airport was even stronger. Go, Vinny shouted, pointing toward a chain-link fence. I'll keep the engine running. Marcus and I sprinted. My boots slipped on the ice, but adrenaline kept me upright. We reached the fence. Marcus, surprisingly agile for a tech guy, laced his fingers together to boost me up. I vaulted over, ignoring the scrape of metal against my leg, and landed in a snowbank on the other side. Marcus followed. Ahead of us was the sleek glass building of the private jet center. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the warm glow of the lounge. It looked peaceful. It looked expensive. We burst through the automatic sliding doors, gasping for air, covered in snow, looking like two lunatics crashing a gala. The receptionist, a woman with a tight bun and perfect makeup, stood up in alarm. Excuse me, you cannot be in here. This is a restricted area. I ignored her. I scanned the room. And there they were. In the corner, near the fireplace, stood Brad. He was wearing his camel trench coat, his face red with rage, pointing a finger at two TSA agents who looked annoyed. Next to him, sitting on a leather sofa, was Sarah. She looked small, wrapped in a white fur coat that probably cost more than my car. She was nervously tapping her foot. Behind them, on a luggage cart, were the 4 large wooden crates. One of them had been pried open by the agents. "I am a U.S. citizen and a taxpayer," Brad was shouting. "This is harassment! I have a flight scheduled to keep. My client is waiting in the Caymans." "Sir, the system flagged a potential security risk," the agent said calmly. "We just need to verify the contents of these crates. The manifesto says household goods, but the X-ray is showing density consistent with metal." "It's sculpture," Brad lied. "Modern art. It's bronze. If you scratch it, I will sue this entire department into oblivion." I walked forward, my footsteps heavy on the marble floor. The sound of my heels clicking echoed in the silence that had suddenly fallen over the room. "It's not art, Brad," I said loud and clear. Brad froze. His hand, which had been raised to emphasize a point, stayed in the air. He turned slowly. The color drained from his face so fast it was like someone pulled a plug. He looked at me, wet hair, red cheeks, shivering, but standing tall. Then he looked at Marcus standing behind me. "Maya," he whispered. It wasn't a question, it was a realization of horror. Sarah gasped and stood up, clutching her purse. "Brad? What is she doing here?" I walked right up to him. The TSA agents looked between us, sensing the shift in power. "He's not taking art to the Caymans," I told the agent, locking eyes with Brad. "And he's not going for business. This is my wife," Brad stammered, trying to regain his composure. He put on his charming executive smile, but it was twitching. "She's clearly having a breakdown. We're going through a difficult divorce. She's been stalking me. Officer, please remove her." "Stalking you?" I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "You filed for divorce 3 hours ago. You emptied our joint accounts. You bought a one-way ticket for your mistress." I pointed at Sarah. "And you're trying to smuggle assets out of the country." "She's crazy," Brad said, his voice rising in panic. "She's delusional. Officer, get her out of here now." The agent looked at me. "Ma'am, do you have proof of these allegations?" "Oh, pup. Proof." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the burner phone. "I have his text messages arranging the flight. I have the deeds to the properties he bought with embezzled funds." I turned to Marcus, and my associate has the digital trail of the transfers. Marcus stepped up, holding his laptop like a shield. "I also have the chat logs where he discusses hiding the gold bars in the sculptures." Brad flinched. The word gold hung in the air. The agent's eyes narrowed. He looked at the crate. He looked at Brad. "Gold bars, sir." "It's a lie," Brad screamed. He lunged toward me, his hands reaching for the phone. "Give me that." Marcus stepped in front of me, but Brad was bigger. He shoved Marcus aside and grabbed my wrist. His grip was painful, desperate. "You ruin this for me, Maya, and I will kill you," he hissed, his face inches from mine. "I will bury you." "Sir!" "Step back." The TSA agents drew their tasers. But Brad didn't let go. He was losing control. The mask of the civilized corporate man was slipping, revealing the monster underneath. "Up in the crate!" I shouted at the agent, struggling against Brad's grip. "Open it!" The second agent grabbed a crowbar and jammed it into the wooden lid of the crate. With a loud crack, the wood splintered. He heaved the lid open. We all looked inside. It wasn't gold. It was stacks and stacks of cash, tightly wrapped bundles of $100 bills. Millions of dollars. But on top of the cash, sitting right in the center, was something else, something that made my blood run cold. It was a file folder, red, labeled confidential, and written on the label in bold black marker was my name, Maya Sterling, life insurance policy. Brad's grip on my wrist loosened. I pulled away and stared at him. "You weren't just leaving," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "You were going to cash in on me too." Brad's eyes darted around the room. He saw the cash exposed. He saw the agents moving in. He saw the look on Sarah's face. She was backing away from him in horror. He did the only thing a coward does when cornered. He ran. He shoved the agent aside and bolted toward the glass doors leading out to the tarmac, where the jet was waiting. "Stop him," the agent yelled. Brad burst through the doors into the blizzard. I didn't think. I just reacted. I ran after him. The tarmac was a frozen hellscape. The wind hit me with the force of a physical slap, stealing the breath from my lungs. But I kept running. Ahead of me, Brad was a dark silhouette struggling against the whiteout. He slipped on a patch of black ice, his expensive Italian loafers finding no traction, and scrambled back up like a desperate animal. "Bad best, Kreiserwachtervorings." I screamed, but the wind tore the name away before it reached him. The private jet was 50 yards away. Its engines were already whining, a high-pitched scream that vibrated in my chest. The stairs were down. The pilot was in the cockpit, likely running through pre-flight checks, unaware or ignoring that his passenger was a fugitive running from federal agents. Brad reached the stairs. He grabbed the railing, hauling himself up. He turned back for a split second. His eyes met mine. There was no arrogance left in them, no smug superiority, just pure, unadulterated fear and hate. I lunged. I didn't have a plan. I just threw my body weight at the bottom of the stairs, grabbing the hem of his long trench coat. "Let go!" he shrieked, kicking backward. His heel caught me in the shoulder, sending a shockwave of pain down my arm. I lost my grip and fell back onto the icy asphalt. The cold wetness soaked instantly through my jeans. I looked up. Brad was at the top of the stairs, pounding on the fuselage door. "Open it! Let's go! Move!" He was screaming at the cockpit window. But the door didn't open. Through the cockpit glass, I saw the pilot look down. He saw me on the ground. He saw Brad frantically banging on the metal. And then he looked beyond us. I turned my head. The TSA agents, weapons drawn, were sprinting across the tarmac. Behind them, 2 NYPD cruisers were tearing through the security fence, lights flashing red and blue against the gray snow. The pilot made a choice. He wasn't going to aid and abet a fugitive. The engine spooled down. The whining pitch dropped to a low groan. And then the motorized stairs began to retract away from the plane. Brad froze. He looked at the gap widening between the stairs and the door. He looked at the pilot, mouthing obscenities. "No, no, you work for me," Brad screamed, slamming his fist against the metal skin of the jet. But the plane was closed. He was stranded on a metal staircase in the middle of a blizzard, with nowhere to go. He turned around to face the tarmac. I was standing up now, holding my injured shoulder. I wasn't running anymore. I didn't need to. "It's over, Brad," I said. I didn't shout. The wind seemed to die down just enough for him to hear me. He looked at me, then at the approaching agents. For a second, I thought he might jump. I thought he might try to run into the snowfield. But Brad was a coward. He slumped, his shoulders dropped. The facade of the powerful, untouchable hedge fund manager crumbled, leaving behind just a shivering man in a wet coat. "Get on the ground! Now!" the lead agent's voice boomed. Brad sank to his knees on the metal grating of the stairs. He put his hands on his head. I watched as they swarmed him. They didn't treat him gently. They yanked his arms behind his back, cuffing him with a metallic click that sounded sweeter than any Christmas carol. They dragged him down the stairs. As they walked him past me, he stopped. The agents tried to push him forward, but he dug his heels in. "You're nothing without me," he spat, his teeth chattering. "You're a trophy wife. You have no skills, no money. I made you. You'll starve." I looked him dead in the eye. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel afraid. I felt light. "You didn't make me, Brad," I said, my voice steady. "You just rented my time, and the lease is up." I leaned in closer, whispering so only he could hear. "And by the way, you play checkers. I play chess. Checkmate." The agents shoved him into the back of the cruiser. I watched through the window as he thrashed against the seat, screaming silent words behind the glass. I turned back to the terminal. Marcus was standing at the glass doors holding Sarah's fur coat. Sarah was already in handcuffs, weeping into the shoulder of a female officer. I walked back inside. The warmth of the lounge hit me instantly. My adrenaline was crashing and my knees felt weak. Marcus walked over and wrapped me in a bear hug. "You okay?" "I think my shoulder is bruised," I mumbled into his chest, "and I'm really cold." "You're a badass, Maya," Marcus said, pulling back to look at me. "Do you know what you just did? You just took down a massive financial fraud ring on Christmas morning." "I just wanted my dignity back," I said. "You got a lot more than that," Vinny said, walking up with a massive grin. He held up his camera. "I got it all. The chase, the confrontation, the arrest. This is going live in 10 minutes. You're going to be famous." "I don't want to be famous," I said, looking at the police lights flashing outside. "I just want a divorce." But it wasn't that simple. As the police took my statement, my phone started buzzing. Not the burner phone, my real phone. Texts, emails, notifications. Vinny hadn't waited 10 minutes. He had live-streamed the arrest.
Trending 1. The Christmas takedown.
My face was everywhere. But there was something else. A notification from my bank app. Alert, joint account access restored. Wait, restored? I opened the app. The balance wasn't zero anymore. It was $4.2 million. Brad hadn't successfully transferred the money out yet. The transaction was pending when the TSA flagged him. The freeze order Marcus triggered had bounced the funds back to the source. To joint account.
I looked at Marcus. The money, it's back.
Marcus smirked. Technically, since he's arrested for fraud and flight, his assets are frozen. But since you are the innocent spouse who aided in the recovery, you have access to living expenses.
The living expenses.
A very loose legal term, Marcus winked. Get yourself a good lawyer, Maya. You're about to own everything. The next few weeks were a blur of depositions, lawyers, and media frenzy. Brad's empire collapsed like a house of cards. It turned out Orion Holdings wasn't just hiding his money, it was a Ponzi scheme he was running with client funds. He wasn't just a cheater, he was a thief on a massive scale.
I didn't stay in the house. I couldn't. It smelled like him. I sold it. I sold the furniture. I sold the engagement ring.
6 months later, I was sitting on the balcony of a small, sun-drenched apartment in Santa Barbara. The ocean breeze was warm, smelling of salt and jasmine, far away from the Connecticut snow. My laptop was open. I was on a video call with Marcus. So Marcus said, leaning back in his chair in his new office, which I had helped fund as an angel investor. "The final divorce decree came through today." And I took a sip of iced tea. "You got it all, Maya. The judge ruled that since he used marital assets to commit fraud, and you were the whistleblower, you were entitled to full restitution plus punitive damages. He's serving 20 years. You're walking away with," he whistled, "enough to never work again." I smiled. "I am working, though." "Yeah? Doing what?" "I started a consultancy firm," I said, looking at the website design on my screen. Financial forensics and asset recovery. "Helping women find the money their husbands try to hide," I explained. "I figure I have a knack for it." Marcus laughed. "You certainly do. By the way, there's a package for you. Sent to the P.O. box from..." "Who?" "Mates of saving from prison. Apparently he's allowed one letter." I paused. My heart did a little flutter, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was curiosity. "Read it to me," I said. Marcus opened the envelope. He cleared his throat. "It's short," he said. "It just says, 'You were never this smart. Who helped you?'" I laughed, a genuine, full-bellied laugh that felt like freedom.
Read it back, Marcus.
"What do you want to say?" I looked out at the ocean. I thought about the scared girl sitting in the kitchen with divorce papers on her lap. I thought about the receipts in the trash, the burner phone, the chase. "Tell him," I said, smiling. "Tell him I was always this smart. You were just too busy looking in the mirror to notice." I closed the laptop. I took a deep breath. It was finally over. The nightmare that started on Christmas was gone. But the woman who came out of it, she was just getting started.